Welcome to the Buick Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Sheldon, and on this podcast, we dive deep into the outdoors. We discuss hunting and fishing techniques, give you tips and tricks, tell stories, and everything in between to help you enjoy the outdoors. This podcast is brought to you by Northbound Gear. Northbound Gear is designed for maneuverability and durability and is made to last through even the toughest of elements. My go-to for their pants is the water resistance adventure pants and their lined waterproof jeans. I've worn them while out ice fishing, crawling through the woods bear hunting, and on the west coast out on the boat. And I even wear them around when I'm having a lazy day at the house. They are that comfortable. They also offer jackets, summer pants, backpacks, and many more. Men's and women's sizes are available, and by partnering with One Tree Planted, you're planting a tree with every purchase. Check them out for yourself at northboundgear.co, and when you use my promo code Sheldon15 at checkout, you'll receive 15% off your order. That's northboundgear.co and promo code Sheldon15. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Buick Outdoors podcast. If you're new here, I'm your host Sheldon, and a few things first before we get into it today. If you're just watching this on YouTube and you want to listen to it, you can find us on all major podcast platforms. Just search up the Buick Outdoors Podcast and you'll find us all over the map. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, pretty well any major podcast platform. You can find us on there. Also, if you're just listening to this and you want to watch the video version, just go on to YouTube, search up Buick Outdoors, and we have an entire podcast playlist. So, with that being said, we're going to get into today's show. Right now, it's a good time to get in that last minute kind of spring season ice fishing trip. We just pretty well wrapped up our ice fishing trip. I did one trip to Moberly Lake and I did another one to Inga. Unfortunately, the fishing wasn't that good. The ice conditions at Moberly really stopped us from where we could go. Right now, it's very, very critical to make sure that you do like a test hole. So before you even go out onto the ice with really anything, just grab your ice auger, head out whatever it is, 50 yards, 100 yards, 25 yards, whatever, and just drill into the ice and make sure you still have good, solid ice and it's not real slushy. And you want to make sure there's enough ice on there that you're going to be safe. At Moberly, it's a little bit different there. And again, this is where you have to, you need to know the area that you're fishing into. With Moberly, there's a lot of springs that flow into that lake. So at the boat launch, I parked the truck right at the boat launch on the gravel bar. I walked out there maybe about 30 yards or so, and I drilled a hole. There was still about 16 inches of ice right near the bottom, that last little kind of 3-4 inches. It was pretty slushy, but I was still confident that we had enough ice. So I actually took my truck onto the ice, and I was about 20 yards from shore, and I drove down the lake about 100 yards, and I could see some stuff that looked a little iffy. So I stopped and I got out and I walked over to it, and it looked like there was an open hole there. So I went back to the truck and I grabbed my little ice scooper, walked over there, and before I could even put the ice scooper in and kind of look around, I was already getting a little bit freaked out, pretty much, because it was a hole right down to the bottom of the lake, and the ice was so thin right there, I wasn't even sure if it was going to hold up my body weight. So I kind of poked and prodded, went up to that hole, put the ice scoop in there, and I grabbed the bottom of the ice. And right there in that one spot, there was only about 3 to 4 inches of ice. So I went back to the truck, rolled down all 4 windows, slowly backed up, parked her back onto the gravel, got out, and then we went out and we just walked out and went fishing. But if you're not paying attention and you just drive onto a lake real willy-nilly, real cowboy style, you can get into some pretty hairy situations. And potentially die, really, if you fall through the ice and it's deep enough, or your body goes into shock from the cold water and you can't swim. Your chances are not going to be good. With that being said, if you ever do fall through the ice, the best thing to do, if you still have movement in your arms and legs and stuff, is swim to the edge. Try to get your arms up there, so your arms are kind of flat on top of the ice, and scoot yourself up, and then don't stand up. Just belly crawl all the way to shore, and then once you get onto shore, kind of get evaluated and see what's happening. Build a fire if you can, get warmed up and dried up and all that good stuff, and then kind of go from there. If you do fall through the ice and you do happen to get back onto the ice, if you stand up right away, there could be another real flat or another real soft spot right there. And when you stand up, all your body weight is just on one little pedestal, basically. And then there's a good chance that you'll fall through again. You'll have to go through this whole ordeal twice. So that way, that's the reason why you have to stay flat if you do fall through. But anyways, get that out of the way. When we were out there, the wind was just howling like crazy. It was 50 to 70 kilometer an hour winds. The wind gusts were absolutely nuts. I made a video on how to set up your ice fishing tent by yourself if you're in windy situations like that. The tent didn't go anywhere. The problem that we had though is that it was so warm that the ice on top was getting kind of soft. So anytime that the wind would blow and it would grab my tent and really jar on it, it wasn't bending my ice anchors, but it was basically carving the ice out. So by the end of the day, when the wind finally did calm down, all my ice anchors, they went in at a 45 going away from the tent. By the time the wind calmed down, all my ice anchors were either straight up and down or at like a 45 towards the tent, because the wind was grabbing it and hitting it so hard. And even the one wall, I set up another ice anchor and I put out guidelines, and the first ice anchor pulled out. So I ended up putting 3 ice anchors in the front wall where the one guideline was at. And by the end of the day, all 3 again were at like a sharp 45, almost 60 degree angle going towards the tent because that wind was hitting it so hard. But yeah, we're trying out at Mobley Lake for one more good whitefish catch out there, but we just didn't catch anything. We ended up spending the night, me and Shelby and the dogs. It was a beautiful, calm night. Thankfully, the wind calmed down, so we had a really good trip there. With that one, I was going to film a fishing video, but we didn't catch anything, so there's no point in putting anything together for that. After that, I went out to Inga Lake, and again, for some reason, that was the second time I went this year where I kind of got skunked, so I didn't film overly too much there. I do have enough footage to put something together, but it's just gonna be like a day with the dogs on the ice. But I don't know. It'd be semi entertaining, but not exactly what I want to put up onto the channel. But whatever, it's in my back pocket anyways, if I absolutely need one. But yeah, so ice fishing, it's pretty well coming to an end here now. Right now, the temperature is getting pretty warm during the day. It's around 8 to 10 degrees during the day. The other day it was like 14. So now I'm basically just gearing up and getting ready to start heading out camping. Doing some camping trips under the stars or building lean-tos. Hopefully soon here, probably about mid-April to the end of April, we'll be able to start tapping our birch trees. So I think my brother's wanting to come out to tap some birch trees and make some birch syrup. So I'm extremely excited if he's able to do that. If not, you'll see just me and maybe even Shelby out tapping trees and making syrup. It's always a blast doing that. Making your own syrup just in general is just cool to do. Also, it gets you outside in the springtime. After a long winter up here in the north, you start getting quite a bit of cabin fever kind of a thing starting to settle in. So, yeah, as soon as kind of April hits, I'm always just chomping at the bit to get outside. And, tapping birch trees, it's one of those things where, for whatever reason, is not very common around here. I know other places where they have maples. Uh, there's like a giant community on tapping maples and making maple syrup, and I believe that why most people don't tap birch trees in the north is just because they don't know that they can actually do it, and or they're overwhelmed and they think that you need a whole pile of taps and drills and this and that, and you need a pile of equipment because if you watch some of these hardcore maple guys, like they have some serious setup. But really up here, when I first started out, I went out with a little package of like 50 thumbnails that I bought from like Walmart for $2 or whatever, a sleeve of red Solo cups, a roll of duct tape, and my pocket knife. And when you're first starting out, it's a good way to do it. It gets you outside and it does get you a little bit of birch water that you can make some syrup with. Basically, I take a red Solo cup and I tack it to a tree. And then I take a small strip of duct tape and I tape it to the tree and then make it so it actually drips or drapes down into the red Solo cup. And then probably about a half an inch above the duct tape, I just do a real shallow V notch cut. So I just take my knife and I just stab it straight in so it's a V. So that way when the water starts to run out, it hits like the bottom corner of that V, and that's directly above your duct tape. Birch water goes onto your duct tape and then falls into your cup. And it works, for the most part, it works good. But a lot of times what'll end up happening is eventually the birch water gets in behind your tape, and then the birch water just kind of goes around everything, runs down the side of the tree, and you end up losing quite a bit. So since then, I've moved on to a bit of a different setup. It's basically like a poor man's maple syrup setup. I have a drill and a drill bit, and I use the little half-inch male by male like hose connectors, the little brass things. You can buy them like a bag of 25 from pretty well any hardware store. And the drill bit I use is just a hair smaller than half-inch. So in that way, when you drill into that tree about quarter of an inch to half-inch, and you tap in your male by male connector, it creates a great seal around that connector. And then same thing with the cup. I just thumbnail that to the tree underneath. Or some years or some trees, I use a bucket and a 2-inch nail, because some of those trees, it's like you turn on a tap and they just run steady. Others, it's a slow drip. It all kind of changes per tree, but you figure that out real quick. But anyways, yeah, I just tack that cup to the tree underneath that tap. It drips in a couple times a day. I make my rounds with clean 5-gallon buckets. Just grab the cup, dump it in there, and man, you're off to the races. One thing that's nice is in April is when it still freezes at night, and you go around in the morning first thing, and your cup is right full to the rim, and you break off the ice, take that ice, toss her out, and you take a swig of that birch water. It's one of the most freshest, semi-sweet, it's just like absolutely beautiful mineral water with just a slight little bit of sweetness to it. And when it's extremely cold like that, it's just amazing. It's one of those things where you really gotta try it. I've tried buying birch water from the grocery store and from the health food store before, and that stuff is I'm telling you, that's not the same. That I don't know what is in those bottles, but I highly doubt it came from a birch tree, or it's a birch tree full of pesticides or something. It's not good, and it definitely does not taste the same. So if you want to try birch water, it's very, very easy to find. It's easy to collect, and it tastes amazing. Uh, and then also, once as I get probably about, I'd say about 5 to 10 gallons of it, if I'm making just a small batch of syrup, you can either use like cheesecloth, game bags, or a clean pillowcase. And I'll take one bucket and I'll put the pillowcase just on top of it, and I roll it up so there's just one little divot kind of in the center of it. And I'll take all the birch water that I collected, because a lot of times you get a little bit of leaves or twigs, bugs, stuff like that in it, and I just dump it through the little pillowcase or game bags, whatever it is that you're using, and use that as a filter. And then after that, you just take it, put it onto your pot, put it onto like a rolling boil for, well, quite a few hours. It's about 99% water and only about 1% sugar. But you just slowly boil it down, and then I finish it off in the oven, or not in the oven, but on the stove in the house, because it's a real delicate process once you're getting down to the finishing side of things. And the syrup that you get out of it, it's kind of like maple syrup, but it's more of a kind of like a caramel, brown sugary kind of a taste to it. It's a very unique flavor, and man, I'm telling you, it's some of the best syrup you'll ever eat. And then too, like, just a cool factor, if somebody comes over for whatever, pancakes, and you're like, here, try some of this, birch syrup that I made. And it's something that people haven't even heard about, let alone know how to do it or how to make it, or they didn't even know that you knew how to make it. So that's one thing I'm always looking forward to doing. And then this year I'll be filming that again. I think it was 2 years ago I filmed how to do it, but now my camera gear is a little bit better. I'm a little more comfortable in front of the camera now too, so I should be able to make a much better video here this year. Then plus, if Blaine and Courtney are out there with me, or if Shelby comes with me, it would be just even better just to have company. And yeah, it's a real fun time. And I think my dad might even come out this year as well. It's been a long time since he's made any. I think the last time he made any is when I was pretty well living on the trap line there in the wall tent, and I was trapping beaver, and he was cutting firewood and tapping birch trees. And Dirty Bugger didn't want to do the big boil out at the cabin, so he came over to where I was sleeping in a tent and boiled all of his syrup there. So I had a couple of bears come out and visit too, but nah, they kept going up the road. It wasn't a big deal. Another thing that I'm wanting to do here this year is I'm really wanting to find a spot where I can kind of set up camp, kind of a thing. I'm always talking about getting outside, getting away from everything, and having a place to go. And I think this year I might either take the pickup or take the side-by-side out somewhere and just look for a real nice flat spot where you have some sun shining through, whether it's a big stand of spruce or pine or something, and just kind of doll it up a little bit. Make it so we have a place that we can just kind of get away from the house, even though we do live in a very remote place already as is. We still have neighbors. They still have dogs that bark. We have the odd truck that goes by. And, some days it's nice just to go out into the bush where there's actual silence. And if you can have a place where it's set up and, you start to have a connection to that place. And it kind of starts to feel a little special, feels kind of like home kind of a thing when you go there. I really, really want to have a place like that. And then maybe even this winter I can take the wall tent out there and set that up and stay whatever 4 or 5 days in my wall tent and then break her all down, take her home kind of a thing. So I don't want to leave anything up permanently or leave something up for the squirrels to chew on or the bears to get into. But that's just something to kind of look forward to and do this summer and this fall maybe. But yeah, start the search in the springtime anyways. It's just one of those things, like I said, it's just nice to have somewhere that you can go, that that's there. Hopefully it doesn't get logged. Right now they're kind of ramping up on logging around in the area, so you gotta be a little mindful about that. Just watch out for the CanCooker ribbons and all that. But whatever. Those guys, they gotta make a paycheck too. One thing I was really looking at getting into one of those lightweight hot tents. I do have a wall tent. It's a Cabela's Bighorn 3 wall tent, and it's the same fabric that's made. They use the same fabric that they make the Lacnic tent with too from Cabela's, and it's a good tent if you're using it in the spring and summer. Some falls it would be all right. The problem is that it's like a poly fabric, so it doesn't breathe whatsoever, and the condensation builds up a lot in it. Well, it'll build up a lot in it if you don't plug the vents. The problem though is the vents are so huge and there's so many of them that if you don't plug the vents up, you're just like it's like sleeping with the window open, and it's just constantly cold. You have this constant draft of air coming in, and it's just not comfortable, especially once you have your fire going inside. I've seen some people, they did what I did. You pretty well just take tape and you tape up all your vents, or you take rags and you shove them in there. I've seen some people, they had like that silver bubble wrap stuff that you use for like the skirting on modular homes. But it's such a pain dealing with that stuff, and then it's hard to put your tent away too. And then if you go anywhere, you gotta bring a couple rolls of duct tape or a couple of sheets of this bubble wrap insulation stuff, and it's not meant for the northern Canadian weather. Maybe down south, especially in the States, you'd be fine with it. I don't think you'd have a problem. But yeah, up north here, it's not really worth it to keep it around. But anyways, that's why I was looking at the lightweight kind of hot tents. Like Pomali, Lux, Seek Outside. They all sell these lightweight tents. You can get like the inner half tents. You can get the fold up titanium stoves in them as well. But again, that stuff is so small. I would be able to use it in spring, summer, and fall. But in the winter, there's no way you'd be able to use it. I even spoke with the guy who owns Pomali, and he tested out one of his new tents and stoves when it was minus 20, I think, and he said he almost froze to death. And that's coming from the guy who owns the company and controls all the manufacturing, and like his last name is Pomali, like. So for that is not gonna work. We don't get too many winter days where it's warmer than minus 20 kind of a thing. And also the price point on those is pretty big. The tents themselves are cheap. They're, depending on the model and the size, but the ones I was looking at were like a 2 to 3 person tent, maybe with the inner tents in them. And with those ones, they're around $150 to $300 range. But then the fold up lightweight titanium stoves, they're like $500. So in like all together, you're looking at, whatever, $600 to $800. And for like $200 more, I'd be able to get a canvas wall tent. So with that being said, the lightweight things, if I had the extra money, I think I would buy one just to kind of have it, but I don't really know how much use I would get out of it. But with that being said, maybe someday in the future, I might buy one, or who knows, maybe I can strike a deal with them and make some videos for them or whatever, and I can just test them out or something. Whatever the case may be, sometime in the future, I'll probably get one. But for right now, I just can't justify spending that kind of money to get one. Especially, like, I want to use it during the winter, especially for my ice fishing trips. I like to go out for more than one day. For me, I live so far out of town, and for me to go anywhere, even if I go to Inga, it's still an hour. But if I go to, say, like Boot Lake, Great Lake, amazing fishing, it's going to take me, an hour to get to Fort St. John. Then from Fort St. John, it's like another 2 hours. So it'll be 3 hours to drive there, 3 hours to drive home. If you fish for like 8 hours, it's going to be a long day, especially in the cold. So anywhere that I go, I purposely plan to stay there for 2 or 3 days. Plus, I just enjoy staying places. There was a point in time there where on my days off, I just head out to Cherry Lake and I just live on the ice for whatever 4 or 5 days, and that was a 15-minute drive from the house, kind of a thing when I was living in town. But then I was also doing the same thing at Inga. I would spend 6 days straight out at Inga, whether it was -5 or -30. I just toughed it out, and I just stay in my little ice fishing tent on the ice. One side of the tent was kind of like my kitchen and my bed. The other side of the other side of the tent was my ice fishing hole, my lawn chair, and man, I just lived life to the fullest out there with old Ruger boy, and it was awesome. I had some extremely cold nights once in a while, but it's nothing a little hot oatmeal or whatever couldn't fix. Yeah, another thing with that Bighorn 3 tent too, it was a few years ago now, but I ended up losing my job. It was like right before Christmas. I think I want to say it was about maybe 3 weeks before Christmas. I can't remember if it was like the last week of November or the first week of December. But I lost my job and I had some money saved up, so I said, the heck with it. I'm going to pack up my tent, I'm going to head out to the trap line, I'm going to live on the trap line for however long till spring if I have to. Like, I really had no agenda whatsoever. So I went out and set it all up, got all nice and cozy, and that's when the vents really started to kind of drive me a little nuts, because that trip, wasn't much of a trip. I was out there for like 2 months, but we get quite a few drastic weather changes up here. It'll go from -20 one day with the sun shining, you get a little touch of a north wind blowing, then all of a sudden overnight the wind picks up, and the next day you wake up and it's like -40. And that happened to me out there, except it wasn't -40. I think the coldest day was -46, and then the wind was blowing too, so whatever it was with the wind chill, I have no idea, but it was really cold. And basically, like, the only thing I was doing during those few days where it was like in the -40s is I'd go out, I'd cut up a bunch of wood, bring it back to the tent, split it, bring it inside, stack it up, and just keep firing it into the stove. And like, that was kind of like a one-off kind of a thing. But right around the stove, it was nice and dry and warm. But you get like, whatever it was, 3 feet, 4 feet from that stove, and the walls would just be sweating. And then the floor was wet. And then it would kind of freeze at night when I was kind of sleeping. And then in the morning you wake up, get your fire roaring again because it was like minus 10 inside. Or well, that one morning it was like minus 26 or so. That I woke up because I was freezing. But and eventually like your whole floor is just covered in water, and like I'm talking like covered in water. It's whatever, a quarter inch thick. You're standing in a puddle, and it's minus 40 outside, and that is not fun. And the problem too that I was having is there was no way that you could actually leave any of the vents open. Because even if the fire was out and you weren't having anything drawing air in, the wind was blowing so hard it was just coming in. So I had to tape all the inside once I got warmed up enough. And then on the outside, I stole a bag of rags. And I was taking rags and I was shoving them up inside the vents. Because on the walls, there was one vent on each wall that was like probably 18 inches up from the floor. And then in both peaks, there's a vent that's probably 16 inches by about 16 inches, but it's like a big, really big triangle. And those things let in a phenomenal amount of air. Even the one fall when me and Dad were building on the cabin, we slept in it, and like, man, we were freezing at night because we just had the wood stove going, and just the draw from the wood stove, all the air would come in, drop down, and go underneath your cot, and it would just freeze you from the bottom up, kind of a thing. So pretty well all night you're just sitting there turning like like a rotisserie in your sleeping bag, because you'd be laying there and your back would get cold, so you turn, and your stomach would get cold, so you turn on your side, and then your side would get cold, and it was just not fun. And that was in the fall when it wasn't even really cold, really. But yeah, I don't get too much use out of that tent now, especially now. I mean, I got holiday trailers and stuff now too, so in the spring, summer, and fall, I don't really have a use for it, because if I go anywhere, it's gonna be either in the holiday trailer or in just a regular tent. Like it takes a while to set that thing up, and then to pack the wood stove and your cots and your little fold up kitchens and stuff. It's way easier to either just pack up the entire holiday trailer or just go out and just kind of bushwhack it, really. So I don't know. It's been sitting around for a while, and I might sell it one day. But it's also one of those things where it's like, it's not like I'm making payments on it or anything like that, and it doesn't cost anything to keep it. So I don't know. I have it as like a backup plan. Maybe I'll do a couple videos with it one day, but I'm not in a rush to use it. That's for sure. And speaking about taking your tent out, going camping, I think this spring here, especially, maybe moving into the summer as well, I think I'm gonna be doing quite a few camping trip videos. Uh, Going out in the tent, uh, doing lean-tos, sleeping under the stars. I really want to focus on getting like your everyday person out into the bush. I want to be able to show people that you don't need a $30,000 holiday trailer to head out with your kids and to have fun. You can go to Walmart, Sportsman's Warehouse, Cabela's, Canadian Tire, whatever. You can buy a cheapo little Coleman tent, or buy something off of Amazon even, where it only costs you like $100, and you can actually go out, head to the bush with your kids or by yourself or whatever, and you can actually have a great time just out camping with very, very minimal equipment. I think for a lot of people, that's what kind of stops them from going, is when they kind of start to look up on camping and stuff, they kind of get overwhelmed with all the gear and all the junk that you can bring with you. Because, I mean, really, to go camping, all you need is a sleeping bag. Like, if you just simplify it. You need something to stay warm at night, and you can sleep on the ground and call it camping. But I think this day and age, with all the materials and all the sales gimmicks and stuff like that, it's like you need a tent, you need an air mattress, you need a cot, you need a massive sleeping bag, you need, a fire pit, you need hot dog sticks, the list just goes on and on and on. And I think that stops a lot of people from actually going out and even giving it an honest try. So, this year I really want to focus on just getting back to the basics. You don't need this great big huge list. One video I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to the bush with pretty well my Leatherman and a lighter. I'm going to build a lean-to, and I'm just going to camp out. I'll have my dogs, and the dogs have dog food, and I don't know, I might bring a sandwich or something. But, other than that, that's going to be a video. And I'm just going to show you, look, you need a lighter and a knife. And you can spend the night out in the bush and, have it actually be enjoyable. I think that's another issue people have is, they think if they don't have this great big huge list of stuff, that it's going to be miserable or whatever. They're going to be so ill prepared that they're going to freeze to death and die. It's like, well, you drove out there. Make sure all your lights are off on your car. And, if you're uncomfortable in the middle of the night, fire up your car, sleep in your car, or just drive home. There's no obligation to stay, kind of a thing, right? So I'm just trying my hardest, my best to actually get people to go out and see how simple things are and how relaxing it is. With a tent, that's pretty straightforward. Go out, find a flat spot where there's no rocks and sticks, set up your tent, maybe collect some firewood, even just deadfall laying around. You don't need a chainsaw, you don't need an axe. A box of matches or a lighter, and you can have a fire. As long as there's enough firewood just kind of laying around, you can, whatever. You can have a fire all night long and just hang out at the fire. I also want to show you that, cool little projects that you can do either for yourself and just to test yourself out, or because you're just bored, or something for you and your kids to do, is to go out and build a lean-to. And again, you don't need anything fancy. Maybe I'll do one where I have gear, and I'll do another video where I have literally nothing. I'll go to the bush with a lighter, and I'll show you that you can build a lean-to, and you can be actually comfortable, and you can light a fire, you can hang out all night, look at the stars, listen to the coyotes, whatever it is, and you can actually have a great time in the woods. Another thing that you can do too is just bring a tarp with you and just tie a tarp up in a tree as your roof or whatever, or you can drape it over a fallen down tree as a lean-to kind of a thing. And you don't need anything fancy and special. When you're building a lean-to, you can do it where there's a great big huge spruce tree that got blown over, and you just build off of that. You just take sticks as ridge, or not even ridge poles, would be like your runners. Just run it down the opposite side of the tree, so it goes from the top of the tree down to the ground. Cut up a bunch of spruce boughs, stack them on there like you would shingles, just one on top of the other till you hit the top. Crawl inside of it, and you got yourself a makeshift little tent. It's a great way to spend the night if you're kind of freaked out by the darkness of the woods and stuff. There's something about kind of being kind of surrounded by some sort of a shelter. It makes you feel safe, kind of a thing. So if you do that, you have this great big tree on one side, you have a wall on the other. Tuck yourself in there. You can't see out of it. You can't see into the darkness, kind of a thing. So you're nice and comfortable. Bring a sleeping bag with you. Stay nice and warm. Bring a book or whatever, and man, just enjoy yourself. Another lean-to is when you just take a deadfall tree or whatever, you just prop it up on a branch on a tree that's standing there, and you just run it all the way down to the ground like a big ridgepole, and then you get a bunch of other small trees, and you do like an A-frame almost off of your main ridgepole coming down, and then again, get your spruce boughs, stack them up like shingles, one on top of the other, until they go up to the top, and then you have yourself another lean-to. For a bed, take spruce boughs. If you lay them all in the same way, so they're facing the same direction, uh, basically like the tip of the branches away from you, and then the main branch towards you. If you lay them all the same way and you have a nice thick bed of those, like whatever 6 inches of spruce bough bed, it's surprisingly comfortable when you lay down on it. Like as soon as you kind of wiggle around and get kind of in place, it's I don't know. It's not a bed, but it's definitely enough to keep you up off the ground, keeps the chill off you, and man, you'll have a good night's sleep. Like it's amazing what happens when you just kind of go out to the woods, and it almost like it kicks in some weird internal something or other, whatever, and it like your a primal instinct almost, and you just kind of become like one with nature or whatever you want to call it, right? And it's just like it's comfortable. It really is, and for a lot of people, I think growing up in the city or whatever, when you're able to do something like that, it almost gives you like a little sense of empowerment or a little bit of an ego boost or something. Like there is something to it where just it makes you feel good. And then if you want to up it up, bring it up a notch, well, I mean, you'd have to have a PAL if you want to bring a 22 with you and shoot a squirrel and cook it over the fire. Or, I mean, really, if there's a bunch of rabbit trails around, you can bring out some snare wire, snare a rabbit, cook that sucker up over the fire too. I've done that before, and man, like it's phenomenal. It's so cool. Some of the experiences that you can have in the woods with like little to no experience and like little to no equipment either. Then if you want to try another lean-to thing is just with a tarp. Start with the same thing. You have your main ridge pole going from a branch down to the ground. Bring a tarp with you and just drape that tarp over your ridge pole and either tie it off with rope to others trees or like a clump of willows or whatever, or you can take a willow and you can pretty well just cut your own like tent pegs. Really, you just find a willow that has a branch coming off of it, and you just cut it to whatever length you want. Say it's 6 inches above where that branch is, and then you take your branch and cut that off at like about an inch or whatever, and then you just flip her upside down so in your V or your Y is facing down, and you just sharpen up the one point. You hammer that into your tarp through like the little eyelets, and then the V gets hooked into that eyelet, and it creates a great tent peg. And you only need like, well, I don't know, depending on the size of tarp, but say there's 4 eyelets on both sides, you need 8 pieces of willow that you just cut with a knife, and man, it's great. And then again with the spruce boughs, you can lay them on the ground, or you can bring one of those small little inflatable air mattresses. Some people like those. They're like a little foamy kind of a thing. If you take that route, though, what I would suggest is don't go out and spend money on like woods or REI or anything like that, especially if you're not really like big gung ho into it. Just go out to a thrift store, or even like Canadian Tire and Walmart sometimes have them on sale kind of thing, but buy yourself just a cheap little yoga mat. I mean, you're not climbing Mount Everest. You don't need something with a huge R rating, and an R rating is like your insulation value. you're just looking for something so you're not laying directly on the moss and grass and stuff. And trust me, a little yoga mat works phenomenal. And they're like $15, maybe 20 for an expensive one. But if you go and you get like an actual like camping R value whatever foamy, man, they can get really pricey really fast. So if you're just starting out, again, go to the thrift store. I've seen them for like $2 at like Salvation Army. I feel bad if I buy stuff like that from like places like Salvation Army, because like I can afford the brand new one from Canadian Tire or Walmart or whatever. Maybe let the less fortunate people pick up the little $2 ones, but that's also me. I mean, your situation might be a lot different, so you gotta work with what you got. But even the thrift stores, like, that is a good place to start getting some of this equipment that you need. If you need blankets, pillows, and a foamy, man, I'm telling you, take $10 to Salvation Army. I mean, they might not have a foamy, but they'll have quilts and blankets and sleeping bags and pillows, jackets, pants, whatever. Like, man, you could get set up easy from the thrift store. And even like over in like their cooking department there, like, I've gotten stuff from my little cooking tote where it's like flippers and spatulas and tongs, all that stuff. Once in a while too, people will donate like a stove, and the stove doesn't work or something happened or whatever, and you can buy like a stove rack, and those things work great for cooking on. And again, they'll be like the 50-cent department, where they just kind of put a blue sticker on it or whatever the deal sticker is, kind of a thing. And then you don't have to go to Canadian Tire and buy a Woods fold-up camping stove for $80. You just buy an oven rack for 50 cents or $1 or whatever, or they might even give it to you if you're buying a bunch of other equipment. And now you have something that you can cook on. Set up 2 little logs that are flat, or a couple of rocks, whatever. Lay your grating on top of that. Build your fire underneath. When it burns down to coals, you got yourself something to cook on. Like, this is the kind of stuff I'm wanting to do this year. Again, maybe that'll be another separate video. Camping off of thrift store items, and then when I'm done, donate them back or whatever kind of a thing. Like, I don't need to keep that stuff. I'd gladly give that back, or see somebody down an alley or something like that and be like, hey, here, buddy, stay warm tonight. But yeah, like, there is something to do with just getting back out into nature. And like, I know a lot of people are scared of the dark. They might not want to admit it, but even myself, like, there's been times where on like the really dark nights, man, I don't like it. It gives me like the heebie-jeebies kind of thing. You look out into the trees and all you see is black. It does freak you out some days. But like, if you ever have one of those nights where it's like a full moon and there's no clouds, it is such a cool experience. Especially like once the fire dies down and goes out, and then your eyes start to adjust, you can see a long ways in the bush with just the moonlight. Because like, that moon, especially when it's a full moon, holy cow, like, it is bright, and it's cool. And like, you're laying there at night, and as long as you don't get into your head too much, like, if you hear a noise, chances are it's like a squirrel. He's looking for a mushroom or a pine cone. Like, don't get all freaked out because this little furry marmot's running around. Little tree rat kind of a thing, like, toughen up a little. And it's cool when you're able to just kind of sit there in the silence and just kind of listen to what's happening around you. One thing you'll notice right away if you're kind of paying attention is, it doesn't matter where you go in the bush. even if you're like hunting, you walk into your blind or whatever it is, or your tree stand, and as you walk in, everything kind of goes silent. And it's almost weird. It gets like really quiet. But once as you're there for like an hour or two, it's almost like the woods kind of get used to you being there. And then it kind of all comes back to life and they all just go about their merry way. And they just kind of do whatever it is that they were doing. And the same thing happens at night. Your fire's going and it slowly starts to die out. You're getting tired. Fire goes out and you're laying there and it's quiet. And it's like eerily quiet. It is a bit of a strange noise if you haven't really heard it. Like there's a lot of people in the city where they don't know what quiet actually is. To them, quiet is laying down at night and still hearing the buzz of their refrigerator running. We're out in the bush. Quiet is quiet. That the one video I just did a couple weeks ago, we had a bit of a Chinook blow in. I pan the camera around. I'm like, this is what you're missing. And it's just like silent. Like I didn't do any editing. I didn't do anything fancy. I just stopped talking for like that, whatever it was, 3 or 4 seconds of me just panning the camera around. And like, man, I think more and more people need to hear that. And, just getting outside and having that experience, whether it's one day or 1 week or a month, whatever, like it can be a life-changing moment. You might go out and you might be scared and you might want to leave, but as soon as you spend one night out there, you might wake up and go, oh, holy shit, I did it and I feel good, I feel great. Man, I need to do this again. Or you could be the opposite. You might go, man, that was the scariest night of my life because it was so dark and quiet. I didn't like it. But you never know until you try it. And, that's where I believe it's kind of, I don't want to say it's my job, but I'm taking it on as my job or my project to kind of just bring you guys along with me for a camping trip and show you that you don't need a bunch of gear. You don't need to spend hundreds of dollars or anything crazy like that. Like, you don't even need to go far. If you live in Fort St. John, go to the Beaten Hills, go down to the Beaten River. You can literally ride your bike there. It'd be like an hour, maybe 2 hour bike ride from downtown Fort St. John, and you be in the bush and like camping in silence. Like if for some people it might be a little bit different depending on kind of where you live and all that, but like you should really make it a priority, especially how a lot of people these days are kind of focusing on kind of like mental health and everything, and people are kind of opening up about their mental health problems and stuff. I'm telling you, a lot of issues could be fixed by leaving anxiety and stress behind. And a excellent way of doing that is to go to the bush. It sounds crazy and almost sounds too good to be true or like too simple. But like that's exactly what it is. It's just simple. When you're out in the bush or on the water, it's you versus nature kind of a thing. And as long as you go slightly somewhat prepared, you'll thrive. Whether it's for a day or a week or whatever. Challenge yourself and, breathe in fresh air and just take a load off. Even if you just go out for the afternoon, take a lawn chair out somewhere and bring a book with you. And just listen to the birds chirping, the squirrels doing their thing, and just kind of read your book and just... it sounds kind of weird and kind of crazy and a little kooky, but like listen to the wind and the trees even. There's something about just going outside and just not having any worries at all. And like do yourself a favor, turn your phone off, leave it in the car, or put on the hood of your car or whatever if you're worried about locking your keys in your car or something crazy like that. And just like leave all the distractions behind and just go out and do something. It might sound a little childish, but like bring a coloring book even. You know, bring a coloring book and some markers, crayons, whatever. Lay down in the moss or sit on a chair, sit on a tree and like color. It sounds weird, especially coming from like an adult. A grown man is telling you to bring a coloring book with you and head out to the woods and and do some coloring. But like it's honestly, it gives your mind something to focus on instead of some weird boredom or whatever. Or like just bring a pen and paper and draw, doodle. Man, start a journal. Just go out there and just vent into your journal while you're out there in the bush, listening to the wind, watching the birds do their thing, whatever. Whatever it is that'll convince you to go is what you need to do. And just like, the scariest part of life is literally like downtown. I've had way more close calls driving my pickup or walking across the street than I have, you know, during any hunting, fishing, or trapping trip ever. And I'm an idiot that walks up to a black bear with a stick and string and I try to shoot him with my bow. You know, that doesn't scare me. Crossing a street, man, I look both ways 3 or 4 times before I cross the street. The worst thing that'll ever happen to you in the bush, honestly, in my opinion, is if you run into another bad person. Like moose, bears, elk, wolves, coyotes, lynx, cougar. You can deal with that. People, traffic, not so much. So like there's no way that I can actually hold your hand and take you out there and keep patting you on the back and saying, hey, you're doing a good job. You have to do that your own. You have to get into the mindset like, hey, look, nothing's going to happen to me. I'm out here sitting on a log, journaling or just watching the trees sway in the wind or going out and just stargazing at night. Whatever it is that you're doing, just relax. Don't have any worries whatsoever and just kind of go. In the end, you're gonna thank yourself, and it's definitely something worth doing. And I can almost guarantee you that once you do it once, you're gonna want to do it again, especially if you get your kids involved. Kids are just naturally curious about everything, and they're gonna ask you 1,000,001 questions, and even if you don't know the answer, you know what? Learn together. I used to love doing that with kids. Bring them out and they'd be asking me questions about rocks and fossils or trees and bugs, and like the amount that I learned just by having kids around is huge. It's stuff that I would have never thought on my own. Like you see a great big rock face and like, hey, what does that line mean? It's like, well, I don't know. We better Google that or find a book on rocks and stuff and figure this out. And like, having your kids out there is so enjoyable. They'll ask you the weirdest, strangest questions, but it makes you think. The curiosity of a kid, as long as you're actually wanting to learn and willing to learn with your kid, man, like there's nothing that beats that. So I really encourage you to go out, whether you have kids or not. If you do have kids, I really encourage you to bring your kids with you, especially the way things are going with the outdoors and stuff. There's some things that are just kind of, it seems like not very many people kind of care about certain certain things anymore, so we're slowly losing stuff. But as long as we raise up this next generation to love nature, really know where your food comes from, how animals actually live, there's always going to be protection for forest and land and resources and everything, right? So that all starts with you, and if you don't kind of stand up and kind of do your part, there is a chance that it'll be taken away. But again, that's part of my project, and what I'm calling my job is just to get more people focus on the outdoors and get you guys out there, and hopefully you just start living a better, happier life, especially after the last couple of years that everybody's had. It's time to kind of take your happiness back and get out there. And I think the first step in doing that is to head outside and just enjoy the woods. But anyways, guys, I think I'm gonna wrap her up here now. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, like the video, maybe leave me a comment or two. Let me know how your camping trip went. If you're just listening to this on a podcast, give us a rating. More ratings and stuff, more engagement kind of makes us rank a little higher and all that stuff. So then our stuff kind of gets pushed out a little more. So I'm kind of using you to get more views. But anyways, guys, again, I hope you like this. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.